Are you aware of this answer to prayer? The British Empire was the largest empire in world history, controlling over 13 million square miles and over 500 million people. When the British East India Company controlled India in the early 1800s, they built railroads and sent steamboats up rivers to areas where people bathed in the sewage-filled Ganges River. As a result, individuals infected with the waterborne disease of cholera traveled back to Europe, carrying the disease. Through unsanitary water, millions died in crowded cities in England, Ireland, Belgium, Netherlands, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Hungary. Cholera spread to China, Japan, Java, Korea, the Philippines, India, Bengal, Iran, Iraq, Algiers, Tunisia, Egypt, Arabia, and Africa. Cholera was the disease of the 19th century. In Russia alone, cholera killed over 1 million people, including the famous composer Tchaikovsky. Infected immigrants came to America, Canada, Mexico, Venezuela, Brazil, and the Pacific coast. In 1832, Asiatic cholera gripped New York. Henry Clay proposed a joint resolution of Congress for the president to set a day of public humiliation, prayer, and fasting to be observed by the people of the United States with religious solemnity. By 1849, cholera killed 5,000 in New York. A mass grave was dug on Randall's Island in the East River. 8,000 died in Cincinnati. 3,000 died in New Orleans. Cholera spread up the Mississippi, killing 5,000 in St. Louis. In Chicago, 3,500 died. Harriet Beecher Stowe's infant son died, as well as former President James K. Polk. Cholera spread along the Oregon Trail to the Pacific Northwest and the Mormon Trail to Utah. It killed 12,000 on their way to the California gold rush. An estimated 150,000 Americans died of cholera. On July 3, 1849, President Zachary Taylor proclaimed a national day of fasting, quote, at a season when the providence of God has manifested itself in the visitation of a fearful pestilence, which is spreading itself throughout the land. It is fitting that a people whose reliance has ever been in his protection should humble themselves before his throne, and while acknowledging past transgressions, ask a continuance of divine mercy. President Taylor continued, it is therefore earnestly recommended that the first Friday in August be observed throughout the United States as a day of fasting, humiliation, and prayer to implore the Lord Almighty in his own good time to stay the destroying hand which is now lifted up against us. New Jersey Governor Daniel Haynes published in the Patterson Intelligencer, August 1, 1849, whereas the President of the United States, in consideration of the prevailing pestilence, has set a day of fasting, and whereas I believe that the people of this state recognize the obligations of a Christian nation publicly to acknowledge their dependence upon Almighty God, that abstaining from their worldly pursuits, they assemble with humble confession of sin and fervently implore the Almighty Ruler of the universe to remove us from the scourge and speedily restore to us the inestimable blessing of health. Ohio postponed its first Ohio State Fair. Dayton Mayor John Howard proclaimed a day of fasting. All stores closed and hundreds knelt openly in the streets and prayed. Tim O'Neill wrote, a look back, cholera epidemic hit a peak here in 1849. Cholera first reached St. Louis from Europe in 1832, killing 300, and returned in each of the next 3 summers. St. Louis was a fast-growing city of 75,000, with immigrants arriving by steamboat, and it also had no sewer system. More than 120 died of cholera in April 1849. The toll grew 6-fold in May, reached 2,200 in July. In late July, with a weekly toll of 640, 7 times the city's normal death rate. The worst death rates were in the slums, where bodies were buried in ditches. Cholera also killed Pierre Chateau Sr., a member of the founding family. Cholera killed at least 6% of the city's population. The official death toll was 4,317. After President Taylor's day of fasting, August 3, 1849, the death toll dropped suddenly. After prayer, this terrible crisis was abated. America has a unique history. It's important for us to remember these miracles and intervention of God in our history.